Method A on tip 0002. That's in the takeaways. We also voted unanimously for yes on tip B1, which was that we went for the 1 million Telos instead of 600K. Douglas talked about roadmaps, which I presume he will talk about again later on. And we did mention that hopefully we're going to be onboarding more people to contribute. We talked about additional working groups. I think that's come back today, so I won't go on about that. So I think that's all fine. And we talked about the tracker issue. And again, I think that maybe that the social media group will be talking about that, and that will be coming through anyway. We talked about the tip 3 in the foundation and the vote and the transparency. That's where we left the meeting really last week, and we were hoping to take that discussion offline. I think we have a little bit, but maybe it's going to come back today. So Douglas is going to talk about that, and we're going to take that one further. But that might be our biggest sticking point, but hopefully we can get through it. We're also going to discuss about which tools we're using. I think we've sort of worked that out in the meet, sort of just in the mix really. I think we've got Slack for communications. I think Trello is clearly the way we've gone on the task management calendar. We've got Team Up, and hopefully that's all working for people. Document, we've got a Google Drive, and we've got a Google Drive area now. So can we make sure that we are using that to drop the documents in? I've done that I created a folder for these for the agenda meetings, and we'll just put the link in the notes, Phil, at the end of the meeting. So that all should be fine. One thing I have noticed, apologies Rob, I was going to DM you, but I never got around to it. We didn't get through to your point last week, and it's not on this week, but I want to take the notion of the philosophy of each of the groups. I want to take that offline, or online, should I say, and talk about that a bit more. So even though it's not on today, I'm sure we'll get around to it in the mix. I think it's coming out in the flow anyway. So we'll start the meeting. I see that we've got Douglas with us, if that's all okay. Or can we all remember, please, to add our name to the roll call in the agenda, and that gives us a record of everything. And a quick reminder, when you do come on, I presume we're being live streamed, but also for the call, even though our names seem to be appearing, but if you can just state your name and your organisation before you speak, that would be a really great help, although we're getting a lot of faces now that we do know, but new people come on the calls all the time. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Douglas for item 1. A quick heads up on the weekly report. Hello, Douglas. Can anyone hear Douglas?
No, can't hear you, Douglas. Can't hear you at all. It's like you're muted.
Robot Douglas.
This is going to be interesting. Douglas with no sound. I tell you what, I think what we'll do is, I don't know whether it's probably better or not, Douglas with no sound. Well, shall we take a vote on that or not? No, let's not. If we want to start, while Douglas sorts his sound out, maybe it might be a good idea to start going through item 2, which is the work group updates. I don't know whether, if a lot of people have started adding to the agendas, and whether, because of the length of this meeting, whether we actually skip to anybody who's actually written something down, or I'll just start with the bounty system A to start with, and if there's anyone, Rob, if you want to talk about the bounty system, or have you left it blank because you don't want to go?
No, I'll talk about it. I've been doing a lot. I just, the meeting snuck up on me. I've published an initial version of the web application that I started working on last week to manage the work rates and the contributions to the EOS Detroit GitHub. What I was going to do is kind of stage it there and get it ready to be forked over to the Telos GitHub to coincide with deploying the app to actually use it. But there's a few features that I'd like to get in before we start using it. So that's kind of where I'm at there. If you check out the bounty system Trello, I created a bunch of cards today that reflect the work that needs to get done so we can open it up to more contributors. And yeah, so the tip is sort of diverged from where the app is, so I need to go update the tip still, tip 0002. That will have the latest details after the web app's sort of stable. But I'm actively working on this every day. So that's where it is now, and I anticipate that we'll have the web app deployed by next week's contributor call.
Okay, thanks for that, Rob. I'm sure you're doing fantastic work on that. That sounds fantastic. So, rewards pool. Anybody want to go on that? Have we got anybody?
I'm testing my audio. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. If it's okay, we'll just roll back to a quick to what we passed and do a quick weekly report. We are posting the weekly report every week in the on Thursdays on Medium, and so we don't recreate that. I'll just say that the testnet is going extremely well. A lot of work is being done there. We are with Peter Bew. We're talking about and the rest of the testnet team. We're talking about when to move up to stage 2, but that looks like that's very likely to come this week. We're sort of softly aiming for Thursday. A lot of new things are coming into that. On all fronts, we're doing a lot of there's a lot of outreach being done with both exchanges and especially with dApps. We have new groups there's the Lynx wallet has announced that they're going to work with us, and in fact we are talking, that has started a little discussion that will result in some tips. So we're talking about ways to start looking at employing Plasma for cross-chain decentralized exchanges which is actually very exciting. And Craig at GoodBlock is writing up a tip for that. He's also written up, I don't know if you've seen this yet, Craig has written up a tip. There's currently no ERC20 style standard token in EOS or Telos, and Craig has actually set that up as a tip. I believe it's tip 5, might be tip 6, and that's coming along. We're actually coming to a position now where we're really leading things between creating the equivalent of an ERC20 type token standard for the EOS Telos system to inverse weighted voting, which is now available, and we'll soon be able to share that out with the rest of the EOSEO world, and the switching the rotating BPs action has also been added and is about to be implemented in stage 2. A lot of actual tech stuff is happening. I don't know if everybody understands how much core development work is happening with Telos in the EOSEO world, but soon they'll be able to employ these or talk about these in the EOS world itself. I'm going to put out a quick call because we can do a lot more, or we can hit our agenda quite a bit faster if we have a few more people actively participating in development. Anyway, it's been a great week for us. I think I'll just leave it at that because we have a lot to cover, but I think we can feel really great about what's being accomplished through all groups. CJ and Katie Roman put together CJ Anders and Katie Roman put together a really exciting internal marketing plan for us that they'll be sharing out, and it's fantastic. So encourage everybody to look for that. All right, I'm gonna, unless anybody has any particular questions about other things we've accomplished this week, I'm gonna hand it back to Jim.
Okay, Sukesh, EOSGreen, do you want to go?
Yeah, Sukesh, EOSGreen here. The tips you're referring to, Douglas, where can we find them? Because I cannot see any of them in the GitHub.
Yeah, so we are, just a quick heads up, we are switching from the numbering system that we've all been talking about. Like I've had thing 1B and things we voted on will have totally different numbers in the GitHub system, unfortunately, and we'll just have to get used to that as we transition over to the permanent system that Rob has set up, which is much better. What is listed as 1B has been added. But it needs to be changed. Its number needs to be changed. Several of these have been added. I think the only one that hasn't been added now is tip 3. There is a repository called tips. Rob, maybe you can better describe where that is.
Sure. It looks like Peter just linked it. So it's under Telos Foundation. And I just tried to respond to all the open PRs. So since they're all drafts, I just want to kind of merge them, but I was just kind of asking for a few polishing touches on that. So I'm trying to be responsive on those open PRs. And as Douglas said, trying to like sort of manage the number reservation so we don't have collisions. So sorry about the inconvenience there.
No worries. My question was specifically about like you were referring to some application, right? Like where can I find the tip regarding to that proposed by Craig or so on? Because I didn't see that. I was just referring to that.
Okay, so is that okay? Shall we move on?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So I want to go to community rewards pool now. Munachi, Telos Africa. Are we happy to move on, or do we want to talk on to this?
Okay. Hello everyone. So we are actually working on the community reward pool. Actually, so I proposed little adjustment to that. The current way that the rewards was supposed to be. So if you check, I don't know whether we should talk about it now, but if you check the Google Drive, only suggested method A, the method about rewarding the community based on the platform that they provided content for. Say, for instance, if you provide, say on Twitter, it's on the Google Drive. If you get people to retweet a certain thing that is regarding Telos, you get a certain amount of rewards. So maybe Twitter, Facebook, and I think there was one other one, YouTube, right? Now, the issue with that is it's a bit limiting, and we may see people that want to really add value, but they are just limited to this platform. So what I suggested was more of a content-based reward system whereby people would actually be rewarded for content they provide. So whether it be video, tweet, or technology, or anything that they do to provide, value to Telos going forward. So I don't know if anybody was able to look at that document, so we can actually take a vote on whether we should use method A, which is just about a platform-based reward system, or method B, which is a content-based reward system.
Okay, if you look on your agendas, guys, we've got some. If you go down to item 3, which is tip 1B, those two items seem to be there. We'll just let that ride for a little bit, and we'll carry on down the reports, and we'll get to that in a moment, and then we can decide if we're going to vote or not vote, and we'll do our voting how we go. So can we move on to DAPS outreach? Do we want to talk about that, anybody? Okay. Development, Peter. I've nothing there, so I'm taking we're going to move on. And then we're down to exchange outreach with Beth and Roger. I know Roger's on the call. I've seen Beth as well. Can we have your update, guys, please?
Hello. Yes. Hi, Beth. Nice to see you as well. We must get that call set up. So I just thought I'd just sort of shout up a little bit and just sort of tell you a little bit about what we've got so far. I mean, there's a lot of excitement earlier about the first exchange that's, you know, sort of said that we could list Telos there, which I think was it yourself, CJ, and you're talking with Fuzzy, and Fuzzy seems to be involved in that project. Have I got that right? No. Was it Summerskin? So yeah, so basically I had a little look at that, and there's a form that we can fill in and get Telos listed on there. So then what we started looking at is, oh, we've got to provide the you know, the correct organisation name, registration number, etc. So that's taken us down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but obviously going down there and getting that information compiled will mean that we can then have all of that information for all of the future applications that we make. So this first one on Open Ledger is a little bit of a test case, really, so that we can make sure we've got all the right information and we can then reuse it for future applications. So that was really just what I wanted to share there. The next, has anybody had any other good results with exchanges that I'm unaware of? Because I've been a little bit out of the loop. Beth?
You know, actually, I can just hop in because overall we've had a lot of really great feedback to the places that we've reached out to. So from the exchange and wallet perception, there's a lot of interest and excitement around Telos. Obviously, they all have their different processes. We've been talking about this a lot as a group, trying to work with them, but I'm kind of just saying this to the big group right now that like things are going good. It's a process, and they seem to be excited about kind of having us on board. So we're kind of working on the onboarding process with them so that we can make official announcements, because we've had a lot of public interest as well. So I think everybody can just kind of stay tuned and know that as things become solidified, we'll be making official announcements. So thanks everybody for people that aren't part of this group that have been kind of providing feedback as well.
Yeah, it seems like there's a few steps that are going to be very helpful in unbottlenecking exchange outreach in particular. And one is something I've added to the end to just begin discussing, which is some kind of updated announcement towards a better launch date. And so that's why I'm encouraging us to talk about that. It'll really help in all our outreach, because it's hard to go to people and say, hey, you know, list us or launch on us, and still be talking about, you know, August as our launch date. And so I'm hoping we can talk about that towards the end.
Okay, cool. So, Jim, you seem to be on mute, so I'll just dive in again there with the next point, which is, you know, a lot of the exchanges, you know, have this policy about a fee to list, and just, you know, how we're going to deal with that, basically. Have you got a response to that, Douglas?
Yeah, so we have spoken about this in the working group and of DApp's outreach, or I'm sorry, of Exchange outreach. And I think rather than discussing that broadly today, there's still some discussion that can bubble up into the group, and then we can discuss it more publicly when the thinking is more final. So I want to respect this group as a voting place and not an open discussion place. So we are certainly aware of that. There is something that we need to discuss also along those lines, and that is what official organization will be used as the for our listing, and we have a couple of options. And again, let's try and have an active discussion about that this coming week in the Trello boards and in the Slack groups, so that we can have a productive, short discussion of it next week. Is that what I propose?
Okay, Roger. Are you want to carry on with you've got a B and a C on there, and you?
Well, that was point B, and then point C was just see if got a regular meeting time arranged for the exchange outreach group.
Okay, well, can I leave you guys to sort that out on Slack? Is that okay?
Yeah, okay.
All right, so we're down to F, external comms, and it's Beth and Roger again. Hey. Off you go, guys.
Yeah, sorry, I just unmuted myself again there. So, well, it was just really to talk about the email addresses and mailboxes and things. We've got a few email addresses set up, so if anybody needs, who hasn't got one, needs something sending out under the telosfoundation.io domain, then there's a Trello card. I keep wanting to call it Trello card with I've started. So anyone who's got an email address, if they could go in and put theirs in there, and then we can see who's got addresses, and then if you need something sending out, you can see which person might be the most appropriate to send it from. And then also we're looking into trying to set up this Google group mailbox, whereby, you know, responses can come into a single place that we could all access and then respond either personally or from the group. But I'm just trying to find out who is the best contact to talk to about that at the kind of Telos Foundation GoodBlock end, and I don't seem to have been able to work that out yet. So does somebody know who that is?
Sure. Beth and I are sort of tag team handling that, and the qualification for, like, I know that everyone would love to have a Telos Foundation email address. There is a cost associated with it, which we're happy to bear for the people who are making outside facing communications on email, right? So that we look professional, but we like to limit it. I'd rather not have everybody just think that they need a Telos Foundation email address. It's really just going to be one more email address that you don't need. So I'm trying to limit that to people who are actively being points of contact for both DApps, exchange outreach, and then marketing. I'm happy. Anybody who has we will do absolutely one for anyone who says, hey, look, I'm needing to do a lot of outreach to outside organizations, but let's do it on a need basis if possible, so it doesn't get spin out of hand.
Can I ask a question regarding that? So I think it's very critical that we have a consistent signature. Has that been created, a consistent email signature?
So
no, that's a great idea. Let's get on that.
Yeah, I did start one again in the Trello board. If you remember, we spoke about that, Douglas. So I started one. So if we can collaborate on that between us, so there's one in there that you can copy and paste out that we're all happy with using.
Yeah, what I would suggest, Roger, yes, you did mention that, and I know Mark, you mentioned that. Why don't Mark, Roger, and Beth just get together and propose something, and then my bet is if it gets past the three of you, we'll all be very happy with it. Is that reasonable?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I think that sort of thing we can sort in Slack, and we're pretty happy with the people that we're doing that sort of thing for.
I just want to go back to the Google Group mailbox. I seem to be getting stuck on that one, so I just need to see if we can talk to your tech guy about how to get that set up.
Who? GoodBlock?
Well, that's the question. Who?
that one. So that one is news to me. Let's. You've definitely flagged this as important, and so can we take this offline from the call, and we'll figure that out.
Sure. Okay. Great. Thank you very much. That's me.
Beth, do you want to come in on something?
No, I was just going to second that Roger and I should just discuss the group box offline.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, guys. I want to move down to governance now. Adam, if you're around.
Yep. Hey, guys. So last Friday we had our first governance call, and we're going to be doing those at 9 Pacific in the morning, 12 noon Eastern each week. It was just Douglas and I this first time, but it was good because we got to know each other a little bit more and kind of talk a little bit of philosophy and whatnot too. But apart from that, we kind of talked about at least going forward in the short term our process for releasing draft documents. And also kind of some initial feedback on his first draft that he produced for the Reg Producer Ricardian contract. One other thing that we're going to try and do is bring in some actual legal professionals too, potentially to work on the team and volunteer their time. And I've reached out to a couple of people in my network here in Detroit, and there's some initial interest there. So we're going to talk further about how we can kind of incorporate those resources too. Yeah, if you want to see where the notes are at, they're on our Trello board. And we're posting the feedback on all the documents kind of on each Trello card. So to keep it transparent and organized.
Yeah, and I would, Adam is setting up a lot of good structures there. I know we have more people in governance, and I'd encourage everybody to whether you're actively in that group or not, to maybe join the Trello board and take a look. The hope is that the documents that we propose will be discussed sort of in committee on the Trello, and we'll see if we can find some kind of general consensus before we bubble them up from that group. But of course, anybody in the launch group is welcome to come in and talk about those. This is going to be we're starting a sort of big push out of documents there. Already we have so there's an overview of the governance documents that has been posted, which kind of gives you just a little bit of a roadmap of what we're looking at. And then more importantly, we have like the human readable portion of the human language portion of the Reg Producer contract is there, and this has been, as we discussed, it's very core to how we're going to hold BPs accountable. It launches with the beginning with the existing Reg Producer contract, and it adds it ties infractions of the rules with a set of penalties associated with each one, and it also talks about the method of enforcement, and then it also discusses the obligation to enforce. So the goal is to work on all the missing pieces of sort of the chain of logic and action in the existing system on EOS, and update those into something that's really workable on Telos. And I'd love people's thoughts on it. I think it's a great step forward, but I've been wrong before, and so I could be wrong again. So I'd like everybody to kind of buy in on that. And then also, we can expect in the next few days for our version of the Constitution. Which personally I question whether we really need to call it a constitution. It may be a little grandiose for what's essentially a group operating agreement or set of bylaws, but that we can discuss. I don't know if we need to be that grandiose to have something that is effectively shaping up to look somewhat between like a trade organization's bylaws, and half that and half software licensing agreement. But that's coming out this week, and I know we all want to look at that, and I would love your take so that we can quickly spread that out to the community. All right, thanks. Sorry, I've gone along there. I apologize.
Okay, no problem, Douglas. Thanks for that. Can I just make one point? And I know we're starting to use the calendar in TeamUp. Can we just also always put in a UTC time on all the calls? And apologies that I wasn't on the governance call last week. I'll endeavour to get on to the governance call this week. And I think, as we all can see in EOS, they are struggling with the governance side of things, and it must be one of our most important areas that we need to get on. So I'll be on those calls, and obviously, as Douglas said, anybody else who wants to come on And thanks again to Adam for all your work on that. Is that, are you done there, Adam, or do you want to come back on anything?
Yep.
All done. Great. Okay, so the GRC, we haven't got a chair for that. Does anybody know? Have we? Is that?
I think Hazim Azad is Azad Hazim is the chair for that.
Okay, Phil, if you could make a note of that and maybe drop that on for me, appreciate it. Shall we move on to social marketing? Sorry, marketing, social media, and Beth. Do you want to contribute, Beth, or not?
I can hop in. I think for the purpose of the fact that this is a complicated meeting with a lot to cover, that we'll kind of keep things high level. CJ might even want to pop in at some point here and say something. We've got different components in the marketing department. It's marketing and social media. It's reputation management. It's all of that fun stuff. We've got a small team that's been working on a plan that looks pretty solid, as well as kind of finalizing the details of our electronic press kit. So we're in pretty good shape. I think we'll be sharing that with our bigger work group shortly here. But CJ, is there anything special that you want to say?
I think you and Doug both covered it when Doug talked about it a little bit earlier. You've got it all. So that's it.
Okay, great, guys. Thanks for that.
Actually, Jim,
yeah,
I'm going to pop in. Can I say one last thing? We've also got a big team that's kind of working with all of the different social media platforms, all of our Reddits, all of our Twitters, all of our Discords and Mediums. And they've been having a great time kind of just engaging with the general public. We've been getting lots of really great feedback. Some people that just also have different opinions. But I do want to say it's been really great when we've seen all of the dozens of partners we have working on this with us also hopping in and joining that conversation. So everybody that's taken the time to do that or to share our information, it's really appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks for that heads up, Bev. I think that's really important that we know that sort of thing's going on and that we're getting really positive feedback. I think that's great. Anybody want to hop in on that discussion? Okay, I shall move us on then. Well, the next one is I don't really want to talk about meetings, because having a meeting about meetings I'm never going to do that, and I've mentioned the UTC thing, so I'll jump on, and I'll just another heads up for Rob, the fact that his point isn't on. Again, we'll deal with that anyway. So network maintenance, is it Jesse, Jerry, whatever? Is that?
I'm here.
Cool.
We have the test net up, and all the producers are able to jump in and out. So we're manually right now manipulating who's on the top 21. But hopefully that in the next few days or so, it's going to get automated, where the system will just be able to switch people in and out. Working on getting them faster now. Working on an idea that hopefully is going to increase the throughput, so we're going to skip the little mini forks that the EOS network is stumbling through right now. That's what we're working on. That's it.
Well, okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. Does anybody else want to jump in on that? Are we all okay?
Yeah, I love the way that Jerry encapsulates major improvements that are huge problems on EOS, and says, oh yes, we got this. We're gonna, yeah, they're micro forking, but we've got a solution, and oh yeah, we're implementing in the rotation of BPs, which nobody thought to or figured out how to do, and which has been huge. I love the encapsulation of that into seconds. I could learn very much from you, Jerry.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the succinct nature of that, and a lot was said there, wasn't it? Well, not much was said, but a lot was done clearly, which we should all aim for, I think, especially me. Thanks a lot.
And then I went and ruined it by
well, I didn't like to say, Douglas. I was going to slap you down, but you know what I mean. I've got to watch my step. So onboarding. Have we got? Is Johnny from Discovering Telos? Are we in and around?
Yep, I'm right here.
Do you want to jump in?
Sure. So, I put forth a proposal yesterday on how we might go about onboarding. new team members. So I'd encourage everybody when they get a chance to drop on into that working group in the Slack discussion. And we've had a few people comment on it already. So really, I'm just looking for some better definition as to what everybody expects and what their expectations are as far as how we bring on new members.
Okay, thanks for that. That's brilliant. I think if we can keep working up in Slack, that seems like a real positive thing to do. And I think that's really important when we come to our transparency issues, which is something that, you know, is clearly a problem in other areas. So that's fantastic. Security, I've got Azid as chair, is that correct? Do you want to?
I mean, I don't think Azid's on the call, but yes, he is the chair of that group. We currently have nothing to share at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mark. That's great. We'll move on. Translations, Chen and Beth. There was a lot of frantic updating of the agenda in the last moment, which I saw. So I'm not sure I've got it all printed out. But do you want to just give us a heads up on what we've got on the agenda?
I can pop in, and EOS is part of this chair group too. I'm not sure if he's on the call or not. We did a lot of work in the last couple weeks to kind of figure out our workflow for this. We've got a lot of great resources within our work group and external resources that are helping to make sure that we're hitting all the marks for the different language opportunities. We've got some great people all over the world that are really interested in hearing about this project. So we're trying to make sure that as much of the high level information can get out there. There's a few holes we're still looking to fill that we'll probably just go ahead and discuss within the Slack group to see if anybody can help with some of those resources. But otherwise it's coming together, and a lot of people on this team have also helped kind of pull a lot of those resources together as well. We are definitely open to, if you also see holes, speak up so we can make sure that we're addressing those, since we have so many people here all over the world. Chen, do you want to say anything, or I don't know if EOS is here either. I think we're good.
Okay, we've got
Moving
a thumb,
on.
so we'll go with that. Smashing. Okay then, so I think we've now moved on to item 3, which is tip B, which is going around a little bit to what we talked before. Can somebody who's typed that up, want to come in and help me out with that? I think we've got a voting proposal, method A or method B. It's gone a bit quiet. Does anybody want to introduce this?
Well, I can speak to it if we'd like, because I've been part of the discussion in there.
Yeah, please put your names on it, Johnny, if you don't mind.
Yeah, not at all. I proposed originally, I'd kind of taken an approach to, for our community bounty program, to track closely to certain types of marketing efforts by the community. For instance, YouTube posts or Twitter posts. And an alternative approach was suggested, which we're listing here as method B, by Munachi, that said not to really tie it too directly to certain media efforts or marketing pieces, and weight things a little bit more differently based on the type of content and the engagement in that content. So if somebody makes a blog post, and Munachi, correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, but if somebody makes a post in a blog scenario, but they get a tremendous amount of engagement, that would be worth more rewards than somebody who perhaps listed a YouTube video or that didn't get as many hits or whatever. So the decision is really, to decide between the A method or the B method. In this case, I honestly don't know if we're here able to vote on this at this point. I think most of the people who kind of chimed in, of the few who did, method B was generally, I think, approved, accepted a little bit more. I think Chen had done some review on that, and I personally, I'm fine with either way that we take the approach. I would just like to get a little bit more input from everybody here on the kinds of ideas that they might have, so that Munachi and myself and some of the other people who want to contribute in this area can start building the program. So I'm not sure if to me it doesn't really seem like it's a voting point yet, but I could go either way with this. I'm probably B seems to be the more supported method, which is fine.
Okay, thanks for that. Have we got anybody who wants to chime in, and whether we want to talk further on this?
Is this the first time that we're seeing this? Are we going to let it bake for a week, or am I just out of the loop and you've all guys have seen it already?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Go
ahead, Munachi.
Okay. So I think this method was proposed last week. So this is the first time it's actually coming on air. But I think I dropped the proposal on the group. Chen has reviewed it. Johnny has looked at it as well. So the idea is really what John said. It's just about rewarding you, not just for just creating content, but also getting engagement on the content on whatever platform, written content, but also video content, pictures, graphics, technology tools, like someone building a really nice website that says time for EOS, the Telos mainnet to launch, something really nice that really gets the community engaged. So that's what the proposal is actually looking at, and looking for a valuable way of measuring the content and giving them a type of reward. So maybe Chen will jump in, then I'll round up.
Right. So basically, another what I think is a major difference between these two approaches is that one approach is more for, we predefine the platforms we like to see people contributing, so the advantage of that is we can basically define the platforms that we think is legit and have good quality. But the problem that I see, or Munachi has seen, is that there are platforms in different areas that we might not be aware of beforehand. So people who contribute in those platforms will have no way to actually claim their rewards. Or the other platform, the other way is to more content-based, where if you create like videos or articles, and all those contents in the certain platform, in a certain basically in a certain content, will be quantified that way.
Okay. No, go carry on, Douglas. Go on.
So my concern with this, I understand we're trying to be as inclusive, and that is a goal of mine as well. I am concerned a bit that this creates an enormous overhead for management for us. And my question for, I hope we can consider is the additional benefit that's derived by the Telos network in the community, does that in line with the amount of the huge amount of additional overhead it's going to take to manage and properly define these? And then Chen, you had an excellent point about the fact that we don't know every platform, but I think, in every locale, but we do, I think we know that there are buckets like video hosting platforms, and there are buckets like Twitter-like buckets, right? And Telegram-like buckets, and that might be Kako Talk or Weibo or something like that in another part of the world. But perhaps we can just think of buckets, and then we don't have to predefine what exact service name, so we don't miss out on any services. Is that being discussed?
I'd like to jump in here, if I may. We talked about this last week, and the metric by which these efforts should be measured is impact. How beneficial this is to the Telos network itself with regards to raising awareness and bringing people to the platform. So we did talk about actually letting the community itself vote on the benefits of these efforts. So I think we need to circle back around to removing the overhead from us as the launch group and putting this back to the community for them to decide how impactful these efforts are.
I'm trying to get my head around how we would actually do that, Mark. To be perfectly honest.
I was just thinking, how would that actually?
Yeah, that I was thinking as well. How we're going to manage that actually is going to be very, very difficult to manage. It could be gamed as well. So I don't know. The objective metric could be lost.
Let's circle back.
Sounds like something we might want to kick back into the groups and it sounds like there's a lot to discuss. What do you think? What do you think, Jim?
Well, I was about to say that I'm not in a position to press button A or button B, and I wouldn't feel happy doing that. So unless everybody in the group suddenly says, well, I want to vote on A or B, I think we should just let this one bake for a week. If that's going to, if the group feels they want a decision today, then we will go for that. But I feel let's just try and move it in the Slack group a little bit more before we go for a vote and come back to the next meeting. People on the group, how does that sound? Or are you really pushing for a vote, or are you happy to wait?
Yeah, we're happy to wait.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then if I could encourage Mark to join you guys and try and work these proposals up in Slack as much as we can, and then let's come back with an A or a B. And one thing I think we need to do, I'm not quite sure about how we're using Slack, but when a group has come to some sort of decision or some sort of area, if we stick it in the general chat before we just put it on the agenda, we can get people to contribute a little bit more. And I know that is to follow all the 50 threads is difficult. But I think if we posting, I would rather have people over posting in general, and I might be guilty of that, than under posting, because I think if we get more stuff out there, and if it's a repeat, then you just ignore it, don't you? But if it's not, then we'll carry on. So I think we'll let that one go, and we'll hopefully you guys can work that up and come back to us either next week or when the appropriate call is. In which case, I'm now going to go to item 4, which is, just to be nice and confusing, tip 3, and this is where we got stuck last week, and it is I've got 1650, and we have a 10-minute rule, but whether we're going to use that. Over to Douglas for the notion of the Telos Foundation voting tools. If you want to take it away, Douglas, appreciate it.
Yes, thanks, Jim, and I'll try and stay on time. We have, so as an update, this is the voting. This is how we're going to distribute and vote tokens. The thing I want to definitely vote on today is the question of, so last week we decided that we were going to open this up, and these are going to be these are actually, it was 2 weeks ago, that these are going to be publicly known who the members are, right? And then what we got stuck on, as Jim said, was the concept of whether we will associate the token address, the voting token address, which won't hold Telos, it'll just hold these tokens, right, for each voter with their identity. And that, what that means is basically we're all under all consideration, under all things that we're considering, we're going to know who all the voters are. The question we are saying is, should we also know and we're going to know how many voting tokens they have. Should we also know their direct identity, or should we hide that for secret ballots? It basically comes down to a question. I would propose that while there are real considerations for security for some people, these are not going to be associated with their funds. It's just going to be their voting. I have in-house at GoodBlock, we've discussed this, and we've discussed it online a little bit. I think that probably the best way to go for this, in my opinion, is just the sunshine is the best disinfectant, full transparency approach that I think a lot of people were suggesting last week. But why don't we have just a moment of discussion about that and see if we've over the last week formed clear enough opinions to call for a vote.
I'm going to open that to the floor, guys, because we had a long chat yesterday. I tried to start a bit of a discussion on Slack, and I put my opinion out there, which is very much the same as Douglas's. I appreciate people have got some security issues, but I don't think we should be working to the most sort of hypothetically awkward situation. I just think if we go for full transparency, that will be my vote. But hey, chip in, guys, please.
Yeah, and Jim, to full credit, you know, the discussion that you started is actually what pushed us towards supporting your position.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, obviously, full transparency is definitely, my feeling, is the way to go. But then when you look back at the EOS launch go, no-go vote and how that kind of set out like this witch hunt, and then when the vote came around the second time, I don't think anybody really dared vote no-go because of the potential PR backlash that it might have brought, even if the network wasn't ready, it went live anyway, you know. And is that the kind of thing that this looks to address that you're talking about?
Well, again, I mean, and as possibly the most single most identified witch in the hunt of that particular one, I have a lot of sympathy there. No, again, Telos Foundation voting is a non-political organization. The idea of this is, the idea here is that we will vote for grants, and we will vote for some kind of hands-on day-to-day board of governors or executives, or we'll figure out how that's going to go, because the Telos Foundation, like as Rob so wisely discussed last week here, this group that we are on, most of its functions need to dissolve almost immediately after we launch, right? So that there's no cabalism. However, the Telos Foundation has ongoing, is conceived to have ongoing promotional functions, right? In promoting the network, in continuing to outreach, both to bring on board new dApps and to bring on board new exchanges. So there's a number of things that the Tele and our ongoing marketing efforts. So those things will all sort of fall under the shield of the Telos Foundation, and they need to be managed. And also we need to have we need to hire some kind of economist or team of economists, traders to have oversight over the RAM published guidance price mechanism. So there is work that still needs to be done there, and of course we're going to be giving grants to people, and we're going to be doing a lot of pro network functions. So there has to be some kind of ongoing things there, and the Telos voters, which are the people who have the voting tokens, because it's a DAO, will elect those people and guide policy there. But again, it's very separate from any kind of voting for the actual running of selecting of BPs or arbitration or any kind of governance of the network. It's just a promotional function of the network. So it's much lower level. I think it's important that we all understand that. That said, I still think that probably we need to distinguish ourselves as being a group that has the highest level of transparency here. And so that's why I support Jim's and Rob's and a few others' wise position in my mind to just fully get that out there. And we can't have thin skins here, and I don't think any of us do in launching this new network. I would say Jim brought up a very important point, which was, should we agree to, under this thing, should someone's identity, and we actually discussed this previously and in the tip, should someone's identity, if they have a long-standing handle-based identity, which is very acceptable in crypto, should that be allowed as the identity? And I personally think it should be, and that might be a way to take people who are in parts of the world where freedom is not necessarily rewarded or respected, and allow them to also participate without incurring personal danger. Just to clarify those issues that you brought up.
I did mention that, and I also thought that because we've now got this really quite strong onboarding working group, that the onboarding process would sort of verify for our group's satisfaction to be able to say that that's transparent. But Douglas, do you want to put a vote question in the chat so we can vote on it?
Absolutely. I will call the vote. I will just paste. So the question for a vote is, and I'll paste this into the chat, or however you decide we should do this. The question is, shall Telos voting token owners be associated with their token addresses to provide full transparency to the Telos Foundation DAO voting? So a yes vote is a vote for full transparency. A no vote is a vote to preserve the possibility of secret ballots. Is that clear?
Can I just ask a few clarifications?
Yeah.
So the reasoning given last week, I believe this is the same topic we talked about last week, given for having anonymous voting was to avoid political issues that might impact, a BP if they voted on something that was unpopular. So now it sounds like kind of a completely different meaning, which I certainly understand people that want to participate that are in areas that it might not be appropriate to participate in crypto, but that sounds like a very different justification from last week. So is it both, or has it shifted?
I don't think it's shifted, Daniel, to be honest. I think the points that you made last week, from my recollection, I think we've taken them on board, and we're sort of saying we're going transparent. I seem to remember that you were the most vocal about being transparent, and I think we've come over to your view, and I would presume that you would vote yes to what Douglas puts in the chat, because I think it's your view has prevailed.
Well, yes. I just wanted to clarify Douglas's statement, because it sounded like the reasoning for why a lack of transparency would still be wanted is kind of shifted a little bit, unless I misunderstood those comments.
I suppose it's a good point because my thinking about this has shifted. The way that I phrased the question has probably shifted. You are correct. The rationale for not associating identities with their voting addresses was that it would preserve the ability to have secret ballots, and I sort of soft sold that to this week, just as a reflection, probably the fact that my own thinking has changed, but that is the same. The mentioning the idea of identities being crypto handles, that is not new, but it was not really given a lot of we didn't give a lot of discussion last week.
Okay, so, fair enough. I just wanted to
it's the same question. It's just the framing and phrasing of it is different.
Okay, fair enough. I will just add, I actually got a lot of feedback because of my comments last week, so I do still feel pretty strongly about the transparency, but I'll just note that there was some community feedback due to it.
I vote yes.
I've added in the chat, the question, shall Telos Foundation voting token owners be associated with their token addresses to provide full transparency in the TF DAO voting? Yes equals full transparency, no equals preserving secret ballot possibility. Is that clear to everybody?
Yeah. Okay. Can I just say, Daniel, that I do hope that you think that your voice has been heard, and that your fears, if you like, have been assuaged. But if not, then get on Slack and we can talk about it further, and we've got an opportunity to vote.
Yeah, no, not at all. I do feel they've been addressed. I just was asking a clarification. I wasn't hoping to open up further debate. So I'm good. And thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. I really appreciate it. So everyone's voting, Douglas. While we're voting, do you want to? There's quite a lot more in the agenda that you've talked about, an introduction, etc., etc., etc. Is there anything else you want to clarify? Or was that just all the piece on item 4?
I think that we should take the vote, call it a win, and then discuss this method of how we actually distribute, how we determine who actually gets them as something for down the road. To briefly introduce that topic, we need some way to figure out who's going to get them, who's going to actually get the tokens, and how many. We're proposing something whereby we would take all contributors here, we would say we would put some kind of minimum that's easily achievable for everybody. For example, 10%, you'd have to have done at least 10% of the average amount of slices, right? That keeps people who've just done a little bit and quit or something from becoming voting members. It's the idea is to reward proportionately how much, how much contribution you've made going forward. And so, and then once we've eliminated people who maybe signed up but not actually done much or any work, and we take the bulk of this group, and then we just sort of divide into tranches based on how many slices they've contributed. But let's not even dive into that. Let's just introduce that and then talk about it on Slack. It would be my.
Do you mind if I ask which working group that is, where that work is being dedicated to, please, Douglas?
Great question. I believe it'd be part of the bounty or the one that James and Rob are chairing. Okay, so if you wouldn't mind, Phil, making a note of that in the notes. So if anybody wants to really join in on this, to head over to that particular work group, that'd be fantastic. I'm going to ask I'm actually just going to ask Mark a question. Are you happy with where we've gone with this, Mark? Because you were quite vocal about that last time. But anyway, no. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, more discussion needs to take place around this, but we're heading in the right direction, in my opinion.
Okay, thanks a lot, Phil. I thought I'd just like to check. Okay, then. So we've got down to number 5, which again is Douglas. And this notion of a launch date, if you want to take that away, Douglas, you did hint at it. So if you want to go with that one. Yeah,
so thanks, Jim. So we are still, our official, the only official communications we've given so far are August, right? And so we had an internal meeting, and I also took a little bit of a poll from some other people in the group about what might be just even possible, right? And I don't think August. It's looking like with all that we want to add, I think August is and the level of contributions on just on the dev side, but also as we look at onboarding exchanges and things like that, that August is ambitious. And my own personal belief is it's better to announce a date that's more. I think we need to announce a date for something to happen, so that exchange, outreach, and other things can happen, can bottleneck. I think that within that, I would like to announce a date that seems realistic. And given the way the EOS launch went, announcing a date for a launch seems less likely than announcing a date for a first go, no-go vote. That seems much more in line with the reality of that process, and I think people who are familiar with it will understand that. So what I'm proposing, after collecting a lot of these, a lot of people's feedback, I'm proposing that we set Monday, September 24th, as the day we announce as the first go, no-go vote on launching the Telos network. And if we can push that out into the community, and I think that is a good balance between announcing something and the reality of what we have to do. The dev team has asked me to point out that to reach that, we would probably need to have more people join into the dev team. Currently, it's 4 people. It's Peter Bew, Craig Branscombe, Ed Silva, all at GoodBlock, and Marlon Williams at EOS Miami, who are actually making active contributions of writing and changing code. And I know we have more people here who have great technological expertise and could join that. Anyway, so the idea is discuss briefly announcing September 24th as a better date, and specifically say that is the date that we will have our first go, no-go vote on launching the network. What do people think about that?
So I would chime in here and say, obviously, there's a lot of unknowns here. I mean, we don't want this thing to be launched in half-baked state, and I'm not suggesting it would be, but there's actually far more value in taking the time to do it right than letting it go before it's done. And other than the costs that we're all incurring to continue our operations prior to launch, I think that we should have a roadmap with a general statement as far as when the launch date is, but with the expectation and understanding that that can shift and will likely need to.
Yeah, I fully agree. I do think there's a I think there's no advantage in coming up with a date that is meaningless, right? I'm always against just meaningless gestures. So we were picking the earliest date that that we thought, you know, that there's a possibility that we could actually achieve. I personally think there is a big benefit to having some kind of action occur in a month that starts with the letter S. So rather than O. But you know, so you have a great point. I'm not disagreeing at all with your point, Mark. It's a great point. I also think that there'd be great optics as we go forward to you know, adjusting our announcement from sometime in August to sometime in September. I wouldn't want to do that if there were no possibility of actually achieving that, but but that would be my preference. And of course, with the caveat that, and I was just asked this, I was interviewed by CoinDesk yesterday, and which is going to be great. Looking forward to that coming out about Telos. Seemed very positive. And the question was, you know, are we going to commit to our agreement to a proposal to launch a full network? And absolutely we are. And so one of the things I think one of the differences that will happen on Telos versus what happened on EOS when that go, no go vote is, we're not just going to be voting whether the software at that moment is conceivably ready to run. We're going to say, are we where we want to be in our published governance? Are the ratification and arbitration and all these things, are they also there? Are we where we want to be with onboarding various groups? I think we need to be much more holistic about the basis for that go no go vote. But I still think that with the progress we're seeing, I think that's reasonable in that amount of time to call the question.
Okay, I'm just going to jump in here because there's one more item I want to get to. So, Douglas, you proposed a date, and people with far more knowledge than me aren't screaming that that's not the way to go. And I feel that if you want to publish that date, unless anybody's really sort of going to be against you, then if you want to do that, then I can't see how this meeting is going to say no to that. I want to leave that in your court, unless anybody wants to put their hand up and really say no to that. I'm sort of looking at Jerry rather than anybody else, to be honest. If he thinks that's, I'm sure, and I've got a thumbs up from Jerry, and he that's it. We're going, guys. I'm just happy. So
Jim, I think that makes good sense. Then what I would propose as an actual motion would be this: let's have 24 hours to see if anyone has any strong dissent. Let's strongly consider any strong dissent. This is not an irrevocable move, but so you know that we can update it. But what I'd like to do is if I don't hear anything in 24 hours from the strong dissent that we've discussed on Slack, then in the weekly report that comes out Thursday morning my time, I'll post this that this is our updated.
Okay, Douglas. Can I suggest that you just put something in general in Slack? If you just put something in there, and then people can join a thread if they really have an objection, and then you can work it out from there. But I think that would be absolutely fine. I can't see you getting any objections, and if you just do that in Slack, if we know where to go to do that, then I think that's okay. I'm going to really stop quick because we've got a 2-minute deadline, but I just want to bring in tip 6 and Jan, if you're there and want to just talk up to tip 6, please.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so tip 6 is about an Ethereum airdrop. In the DApp outreach group, and when we talk to DApps, obviously one of the big talking points is whether the adoption which they will get through their DApp will be better or not on Telos. So we tell them about the 1 million accounts that we plan to give away, and the other efforts which will help make us a more adopted chain. But thinking about that, the idea came up, why don't we maybe combine the giving away the accounts with doing an actual Ethereum airdrop, where maybe everybody who has an Ethereum account gets a free coin, which they can't trade, by the way, which they can't move, which they can then exchange for a free account with a few Telos on the Telos chain. So that's the idea that has come up, and I wanted to just quickly check if people are, what they think about that, if that's something that we want to pursue.
Well, can I be the one to ask the stupid question? And how does that differ from, you know, getting the tokens that they're going to get anyway?
Yeah, the main thing is, of course, if you get a token dropped on your Ethereum account, you see that, and it's an additional marketing tool. As everybody knows, hey, there's this Telos Foundation coin which is being dropped, and that can trigger a lot of people, would be my feeling at least, trigger a lot of people to say, hey, okay, maybe I should do something with that. They will Google it, they will find out that they can convert it, and that will drive adoption.
Okay. This is aimed at people. This is aimed at people who do not have EOS ERC tokens, I believe.
Okay, we are sort of really running up to time, and I did want to get that Jan to be able to sort of speak to that. And I think it's something that we need to discuss in Slack, and it's something that I feel can be point 3 on the agenda, which is the first on the agenda next week, unless anybody has any feeling towards that. We're at 15, quarter past, and that is our cut-off time. I'm happy to move it forward if we want to carry on discussing, but I'm also happy to ask about the next meeting time and call the meeting to an end. Does anybody want to chip in to suggest an extension, or are we okay to find out about the next meeting?
Jim, can you just could you just call the result of the vote that we did call? It looks like it's overwhelming, but could you make that official?
Yeah, well, what we've been doing, Douglas, to be honest, is that Phil has been putting the results of the call straight away on the agenda in the meeting notes. But I'll call that as a yes. And but if all the results are actually in the agendas, and we'll put them on Slack as well. But yeah, it's a positive for a go on that. Okay.
But just to note, there was one no, so it wasn't completely unanimous.
Well, it depends on your version of unanimous, Roger, but yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, not everybody agreed then.
Yeah, all right then, fair enough. The world where everyone agrees, it'll be an interesting one to find, won't it? So I've got the next meeting date is the 14th, which is next week. There has been some murmurings about whether we want to go to 2 sort of heads up calls a week. We have got through all of today's business, so I don't know whether we want to let that one ride a little bit, and whether we just want to say next Tuesday we go again and we'll work in our working groups as hard as we can. That would be my feeling on that. So unless anybody's got any big objections, but there is a thread that talks about whether we need to move to 2. I'm going to say that at the moment we don't, but maybe the next week when the working groups are in full flight, then we need to. So other than that, I'd like to say thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for your contributions and for our professional output. And I'll call the meeting to a close.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, good stuff. Thanks a lot, Jim. Cheers, everybody. See you next time.
Bye.
See you, everybody. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I love it when everyone says cheerio.